recruited for this target program?
Well, I was at Fort Meade, Maryland, and I was working in a Middle East analysis office. And my next door neighbor was Skip Atwater, who it turned out was the operations and training officer for the remote viewing unit. My across the street neighbor was Tom McNair, who was one of the viewers that was being trained. And I got to know them, I got to be friends with them. And I didn't know it. I had no idea what their organization did. But one day, one of them, I don't remember which one, came to me and said, we think you might be good for at what we do in our project, and we would like to maybe assess you for recruiting. And I found out later why they did that. The idea, what they were looking for in the remote viewing unit was someone who was reasonably accomplished in their career, had done all the things you're supposed to do as a military intelligence officer, who also was reasonably smart, somewhat above average in intelligence, but also had some kind of activity or interest that was different than your mainstream military officer, more in a creative sort of direction. So, say, painting or drawing or music or creative writing, fiction writing, whatever, or something like that. Well, it so happened I did all of those things. I played guitar, I kept entering writing contests and losing. And I had been an art major in school and done a lot of art. And in fact, what keyed them in to interest on me was that they one day were over at my house, and I had this drawing I had done of a cat made of all kinds of little dots that kind of filled in the cat, a stippled drawing. And I was there when this happened. They both stopped, looked at the picture, and they said, "Trackers." And I said, "What?" And they said, "Never mind." I had no idea what was going on with that. And so that trackers, it turns out, I found out later, was actually a mode of representing graphically in remote viewing that involves making dots and kind of allowing your subconscious to guide where you do the dots. So anyway, they asked me if I'd be interested in maybe taking their tests that you have to take for them to assess whether they think you'd be good or not. And they're mostly just psychology tests, personality profile tests and things like that. So I took the test, and apparently I scored roughly where they wanted me to. And so they took me over to the office one day, and Tom McNair sits me down at this old beat up table. All the furniture in that office was old and beat up. And he said, "Okay, first of all, you have to sign this form." And it was what we call a read-on form, or an indoctrination form in the intelligence community. The idea is it tells you what you can and can't say about things, and then you sign it, basically committing yourself that you are going to honor the security of that information that you're being provided. So I signed it, even though I didn't know what it was that they were going to tell me. And Tom McNair says, "Okay, what we do in this office is we collect intelligence against foreign threats using a parapsychological skill known as remote viewing. We essentially want to train you to become a psychic spy." And it took me about 2 seconds to realize I really want to try this. Okay, all right, I'm on board. So the reason they recruited me was because they had, out at SRI, where Ingo Swan and Hal Puthoff were working, and others, they had developed a method of remote viewing that they thought would allow people who had no experience and had no apparent disposition to doing it, that would help them learn how to become remote viewers. And so they were looking for people to be in that training program, and they thought I might be a good candidate based on what they knew about me. And so that's why they brought me on board.
Mm. So at that time, didn't you have already some specific human and known psychic skills?
No.
Nothing.
I had never had any success in ESP kinds of environments. Not that I tried a lot, but I was even a little bit of a skeptic. I had been very excited about ESP because I read a lot of science fiction books that had ESP in them, telepathy and that kind of thing. And I really wanted it to be a real thing because it seemed really cool, right? And then in junior high school, so this would have been 7th grade, I would have been 13, 14, something like that. Maybe it was 8th grade. One of my classmates did an ESP project using Zener cards. Those are the cards with the cross and the wavy lines and the star and all that. Total failure. Had absolutely no success at all. And so from that point on, I kind of figured there's probably not anything to ESP, nothing to do with it. And so when they came to recruit me, not only had I never heard of remote viewing, I didn't even really believe that ESP worked. But in that few seconds between when he told me that he wanted me to be a psychic spy and when I said yes, this very quick calculation went through my head. Okay, I thought ESP would be really cool, but didn't believe that it was real. This guy is telling me that they want to recruit me into a military program that trains people to do this. That's got to mean it works. You just have to learn how to do it. I want to learn how to do it. There's no way you can keep me out of this program. And so I went from being a skeptic to being very enthusiastic about it right off the bat, or just very quickly like that, just because of that calculus.
So first you had like a training period of time, and then you started to work on operational project. What is your most interesting operational project, or the one you prefer the most?
I could answer that question several different ways, and I think I'll give you a couple of examples rather than give you my most interesting. It's kind of like saying, what's your favorite food? I don't know, it's pizza today, tomorrow it might be something else, you know. I think one of the more, I don't want to say profound, but one of the more perhaps important ones was when we worked projects on trying to find missing in action, so POWs in Vietnam, American POWs that were alleged to be there. I felt like that was an important project. Of course, when I was working it, I didn't know what it was. Afterwards, now I know about it, I think it was important. People kind of are disappointed with what we reported. We reported that we didn't find any. I think that's great news, okay? Because I really do feel like, at least the places we looked, there weren't any POWs. And I am not convinced that there are POWs there today, or even back then. But anyway, I think that was an important one. Probably my most remarkable one didn't start out really as an operational project, but sort of ended up that way. And that was, well, let's see, I'll tell you what it was. I remote viewed the attack on an American warship 50 hours before it happened. Okay, so it started off as what we call a directed search. The directed search was kind of an open-ended, what's happening in the universe that we need to know about. So the tasking was something like this. Describe any important event that's going to happen in the next few days that is relevant to, I interpret it as, the U.S. defense establishment. Okay? Now, I of course didn't get that tasking. What I got was a series of numbers that stood for that tasking. So consciously I had no awareness of what the intent was. And I start right off starting to describe what ultimately I decided was a large metal vessel in an open body of water, in a large body of water that was surrounded at least on 3 sides by flat sandy land, but at a great distance. This vessel, I had the impression, was an American warship. I thought maybe a destroyer. I wasn't sure that was right. I thought maybe that was my imagination, but I still had a very strong feeling this was a ship in the ocean. It was at night. I was getting interesting impressions like the smell of celery and all this, which are, because I wasn't expecting to get that. I think it probably really was the smell of celery that was cooking that I was getting, and things like that. Then in the process of going through this session, I got the impression of an aircraft off at a distance, kind of flying around. And then at a certain point, this aircraft drops at least one of these long cylindrical metal objects with little stubby wings that made a guttering, roaring sound and kind of flew around a little bit like this, as if it's looking for something. Then as the session continued, I had the impression that the thing that was flying around came together with the ship, and there was a screech and a clang and smoke and fire, and people on the ship are just totally confused and startled, and fire hoses on the deck of the ship and all this stuff, and the ship kind of leans over the side and is all bent and crumpled and twisted. Further information about this aircraft was it seemed to have come from a place near the shore on this flat sandy land near the water, that it was under the control of a group of people who were many miles further inland in what seemed to be a third world city of some kind. Had flat top buildings, there were some domestic animals around, and the people in charge didn't seem to be very professional. They seemed to be kind of sloppy in their military approach and things like that. I got a bunch of other details about that, but as I'm getting through this material, my monitor, the person that was running the session, who had expected me to come up with something else, said, "Oh, well, I think you're off. That's okay. The remote viewers are off all the time. Let's just go home and forget about it." So it was the weekend. I went home. Monday morning, I get a phone call from Skip Atwater. He says, "Paul, where's that session you did on Friday?" I said, "Well, it's in my safe drawer. I don't know why you want it. I was off." He said, "You haven't seen the papers this morning, have you?" "No." I go up and open up the Washington Post. U.S. warship hit by Exocet missile fired by an Iraqi jet in the Persian Gulf. The scenario is exactly the way I perceived it. And not only that, but a number of details that I thought were wrong in the session at the time turned out to be right later on when we got a full accounting of what happened. One example was I had the impression of a large multi-engine aircraft kind of flying around, sort of observing this whole thing going on. And I thought, oh, I don't know what that is. That can't be in there. And then later on, when I got the official after-action report about the event, it noted that there was a Saudi AWACS aircraft up, monitoring everything that's going on, trying to get the Saudi government to turn loose some F-15s to go after the Iraqi jet. And they didn't do it, but even that I thought was wrong turned out to be right. And so that was probably the best session I've ever done back then, or I don't know that I've done one that good since even. It's one of the best remote viewing sessions I've ever seen done, and it just kind of fell into my lap. I don't know how that happened. I was just clicked that day. But it's very interesting that my description, precise as it was actually more than 2 days before the event actually happened. That in itself is an astonishing thing.
So far, during your duty in the military, in the Stargate program, and since then, working as an instructor and doing sessions for other people, so far, what have you learned from working with remote viewing and practicing remote viewing?
One is how exquisitely important having the right intentionality in the process is. If your tasking is sloppy, that means that your intention is sloppy, and if that's the case, quite frequently you'll find that your material, that your results end up being imprecise or wrong. Intention is the whole key to the whole process. Another important thing I've learned is that you have to keep your ego out of the process. You have to be able to just let go, not get invested in the results, not feel like any kind of reputation is at stake, or feel like any kind of personal, personal investment, that's not the right word, personal credibility is involved. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And if you can reach that state, it will almost always work.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't come to that state, if you're worried about being successful, if you're worried that you might fail, you very often will. And it's just because of the nature of the thing. If you try too hard, in this particular process, if you're trying too hard, it's easy to try too hard. And trying too hard will shut the system down. Mm-hmm. You need to let it happen. Let go of the consequences of the outcome. Not worry about it, and just kind of approach it from a, oh, this is interesting, I wonder what's going to happen kind of approach. If you can do that, then you will have much more of a chance of succeeding at it.
And at a personal level, for yourself as a human being, what have you learned from practicing remote viewing, doing sessions, and what has quite transformed your way of seeing the world or doing things? Or
I've learned I need to be very honest with myself. I've learned that I can't make excuses for myself. I've learned that I have to be my own most serious critic, but I have to know when it's the right amount of criticism. Too much criticism shuts the system down. Not enough criticism keeps you from being rigorous in your approach. And if you're not rigorous in your approach, you actually don't make very good progress. You have to be able to be honest and say, this was wrong and this was right, and I'm going to try and remember how to do what's right and remember how not to do what's wrong. I think there are too many remote viewers out there who are not honest with themselves. They want so badly to have an outcome that they can show to people and say, oh, look how cool this was. That they don't really do very well. They try and justify their mistakes. And that's very important to learn not to do that in remote viewing. But the very interesting thing is that that's a very important thing in real life. Not to say remote viewing isn't real life, but in your normal daily life. Because so many people cause themselves and others so much grief by trying to justify their own mistakes. If they just learn to be honest about it and do better next time, the world would be a much better place.
Did your work on remote viewing change your way of seeing the world?
I probably did this a little to a degree, but really in a matter of degree, not in a matter of quality. The way I looked at the world, actually, if anything, was enhanced by remote viewing. It seemed to confirm many things I already believed. And I have to say, of course, my personal philosophy is very informed by my religion. And remote viewing has actually kind of confirmed the things I believe, the basic fundamental things I believe there about human nature and where humans are in the universe. So from that perspective, it didn't really change anything. It has helped me understand things better than I did, but then of course just being alive for a certain period of time, if most people are paying attention, they'll know things better, they'll understand things better once they're a little older. But I think remote viewing has helped me do that, because it forces anybody who does it to learn about him or herself. It's forced me to learn about myself. And I even find myself in my daily life, like I'll be feeling a certain way, and I've learned from remote viewing that, why am I feeling this way? I learn how to go back and find the thing that's causing it and to expel it, just like you would in AOL or anything else, and then move on. And it's been a very valuable thing.
According to you, and for themselves, why should people learn remote viewing?
I think most people would profit from learning remote viewing by proving to themselves that we really are more than our physical bodies. The logic runs this way. Science, and generally our mainstream society, believes that we are nothing more than our physical bodies, that our minds are a result of the operations of our brains, and that any impression we have that there's any more to it than that is just illusion created by the way our minds work. Remote viewing is evidence that that is a false notion, because it goes like this. In remote viewing, if you successfully remote view a target that's on the other side of the planet, and the only connection you had was to think about it, you had no other way of learning about that, it's obvious that your consciousness has to be able to transcend your physical being. If your consciousness can transcend your physical being, that's evidence not only that we're more than our physical bodies, but that we may actually be able to perhaps exist even without our physical bodies. So that means that what is innately us, if that's true, that means that what is innately us really may well have an existence that is not dependent on our physical body. If we die, it doesn't mean we're done for, essentially. If that's true, okay, and remote viewing is evidence of that, and you have that remote viewing experience, if you start off as a physicalist that believes only that the world is physical and life is physical, that will completely change your worldview. Why that is important is because if you come to realize that we are more than just meat machines, as some people say, that humans are more important than we currently think they are. If all we are is physical meat machines, then in a sense, what happens to us really doesn't matter in the long run. You know, we have certain immediate values. We want to be alive. We want to enjoy life. We want to respect other people just because we want them to respect us so that we don't harm each other. But in the end, none of that really matters. If we're all physical machines, we just, someday we die, we rot, we go away, and the only thing that's left is maybe some little trace that we left behind, the memory in somebody else's mind who's going to die eventually, and we're gone. Right? If we are more than our physical bodies, then that's not all there is to it. There is something about us that actually is much more permanent. And if that's the case, then things we do in this life are important, and some of them are lasting beyond just their physical traces. Mm-hmm. And at that point, we need to really approach our lives in a different way.
What do you think is the most interesting development in remote viewing today?
I may give two answers to this, but I'll start off with the first one. I think one very interesting thing is something that I've fortunately been able to have a part in, and that is the inclusion of random event generators in essentially monitoring remote viewing sessions. From the experiments we've done so far, there does seem to be an effect. What that effect means, I don't know. This may turn out not to mean much, but at the very least it is correlation and confirmation that that the other experiments done with REGs that have shown a correlation with human conscious events, this is a confirmation that those things may not just be aberrations, that there really may be something there. Because this is finding a similar correlation in a kind of a different application of consciousness, but it still represents a focused consciousness in the process. So that's interesting. It may prove even more interesting to remote viewing if we find a meaningful correlation as far as results that are being produced in a remote viewing session. In the end, if we find out it's not, oh well, at least we've had a chance to explore it. The other one is associative remote viewing. Now, that's not really new in a certain sense, but I think what is very encouraging about it is that there are a lot of people involved in it compared to many other remote viewing aspects of remote viewing, and they were trying different approaches and experimenting with different ways of doing it, protocols and such, to see if there's one that works better than another and that. It's possible people will get tired of doing this eventually, but I think that this is really the only way. This, just like any other kind of serious research, there's a lot of trial and error and kind of hard work before you start having the breakthroughs. And I think in associative remote viewing, because it promises to actually provide a reward at the end, I think that's a really good effort to see promoted, and I'd like to see where that ultimately make a lot of progress.
According to you, what is the future of remote viewing?
Well, I think that depends on some things. It can go one of two ways. It could kind of fizzle out and go away, which I think would be the consequence if some of the trends in the field today continue. Those trends are the temptation of folks to indulge in sensationalism, to pursue fantasy, to make claims and that they can't verify, and just not to be serious and rigorous about the approach. They kind of reject the science and embrace the silliness of much of the new age fads that have come along. If that overwhelms the remote viewing field, remote viewing won't make a difference. But on the other hand, I am encouraged by some things, and I hope it turns out this way, and I think there's a good chance it will, that remote viewing will start to draw serious attention. People will start dedicating research resources to it, and start working out some of the problems in the field. Right now, it's a kind of in a way, an unfocused field. And part of the reason for that is that there are problems with remote viewing that people haven't worked out how to deal with. It has some weaknesses, and people just continue to perpetuate those weaknesses without doing the necessary work to try and learn more about the boundary conditions and the parameters of what makes remote viewing work and what makes it less successful than it could be. That is going to take some serious research, because you've got to try different modes and different options and test different variables and things, just like you would in any other field. And in fact, they do this kind of work in psychology and physics and one of these other where they just do really fundamental research, almost boring kind of work, testing different approaches, and that's why they have successes in those fields. The reason remote viewing hasn't had as much success in moving forward is because we haven't had the resources, and people haven't been willing to commit the time, and there's too few people anyway, to actually do the kind of fundamental research that other sciences are able to do all the time.
So, what is the future of remote viewing?
What is the future of remote viewing?
If it succeeds to
go. As you well know, I don't believe the future is fixed. So,
according to you.
So I have outlined two scenarios. I think the two most likely scenarios, and I can tell you the one that I think is most likely, as it looks right now, which is not the good one. I think the bad one is the one where it kind of just gets silly and goes away. Right now, if I was playing bets, I'd say that one. The one I want to happen is the other one, but because I don't think the future is fixed, I don't think we're doomed to go the bad way. I think that with enough effort, even a few committed people can turn it around and make it go the other direction. I think it's possible, and I think that there is some promise that could happen.